Welcome to the Finding the Magic podcast, where books come alive. I'm Tricia Copeland, a fiction author and host of this show. If you love books, finding great reads, and hearing about the story behind the story directly from the authors, this is the place for you. Whether you like fantasy, science fiction, dystopian, or romance titles, I think you'll find something to love in my playlist. Listen in to discover something magical about a book or two today.
Welcome, Aaron.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for being here. Today we have Aaron Starmer. His new book, I will say, is You Are Now Old Enough to Know This, or to hear this. Sorry, You Are Now Old Enough to Hear This, a middle grade speculative fiction. Welcome back, Aaron. Last year we talked about your book Night Swimming, which was a YA, I think an older YA, right? Not a middle grade, but an older YA book.
Yeah, a lot of times when I'm writing, I sort of flip-flop between middle grade and YA just to sort of reset my brain, my writing brain each year or two with a different. So yeah, I'm back writing middle grade here.
Fun. Well, talk to us about this book. It sounds very cool, and I want to dig in more. A lot of unsettling, bizarre plot twist here. So tell us about it.
Yeah, so the basic pitch is going to sound a little strange, but it's a story of a family, but it's really a story of a young boy named Roman who's about 12 years old. And in the beginning, he's asked to go help his grandfather mow his lawn because his grandfather's elderly and needs help mowing the lawn. And when he does, and this is in the first few pages, so this isn't a spoiler, um, his grandfather is locking a red shed on his property, and he tells Roman that he can't ever let the tow beast get out of the shed. Roman has heard of the tow beast before. It's a sort of family story that the grandfather tells all the grandkids, but Roman really doesn't know what it means because he's always too scared to hear the story when Grandpa sits down and tells the family the story. Roman is the youngest of many cousins. So the next day, his grandfather passes away of old age, and Roman has to go to his house and help clean out his house. But there's this red shed sitting in the yard that his grandfather has warned him about. So that's the setup. Is Roman has to choose whether he believes there's something actually in this red shed, and it just gets stranger from there. And Roman does a lot of investigating in his grandfather's house, goes up in the attic and finds lots of boxes full of old photographs and various things, and it leads to a series of stories and revelations about his family that he never could have possibly imagined.
That sounds like a lot of fun, not only for your middle grade reader, but also I mean, I'm intrigued as an adult to read this.
Yeah, and it's sort of, I've got a 12-year-old at home, and I've got elderly parents. And so I was thinking about this story from a lot of different perspectives about their relationship with their grandparents, my relationship with my grandparents, everyone's relationship with their parents and their cousins, and sort of, those moments in life when you see that they're not perfect people. They're not necessarily bad people, but they're not perfect people, and they've got their own stories, and how scary that is to confront, but how necessary that is as well.
Right. Yeah, I think there's stages of growing up, right? Where and the title is perfect. You are now old enough to hear this, right? But do you really want to be old enough to hear things sometimes?
Exactly. Yeah, and that's Roman's big struggle is, he's scared of these things, but like anything, you can't help but wanting to know what's behind the locked door, what's in the locked box, what is the family secret. Now, in this book, the family secrets turn out to be much stranger than anyone could ever imagine, and that's part of the fun. But it stands in for any sorts of family secrets that you might have and that you might discover as you just become more mature and start to understand things more.
Right. So does it touch, I mean, is it a little bit of a supernatural, fantastical type of book then? as well?
Yeah, without giving much away, there are definitely elements of magic and things that you don't expect, and that's introduced pretty early on. But it isn't necessary. It never goes necessarily the way you would expect, I would say.
Okay. So expect to be surprised.
Yes, yes. Hopefully in a good way. I hopefully have set it up where by the end it all makes sense and it all feels emotionally true, even though I sort of had fun sort of pulling the rug out from under readers as I wrote it.
Yeah, I read a book last year. It was called A Million Junes by Emily Henry. Have you read that book yet?
I haven't. I've heard of, yeah, I know Emily Henry.
Okay, well, she mostly is known for her romances. At least that's how I was introduced to her. But this is like a YA speculative fiction that, a little bit of magical realism in there too. And I was likening this book to that because it's a little bit of an older market. The kids are 18, so
Hmm.
but coming of age, family secrets, family drama, and things have been passed down through the family that, they're confronting all at one
Yeah.
time. So, yeah.
Yeah, and like anything, unfortunately with the book markets, they market something as middle grade, they market something as YA, they market something as adult. But I really want this be the sort of book that lots of ages can get something out of, whether it's parents looking at it or even teenagers. Because there are a lot of teenage characters in it. The Roman, the main character, has a bunch of teenage cousins, and it's also about how he's going through what they went through once upon a time. That's one of the big themes, is they've all reached these moments of realization, and it's a significant rite of passage.
Right. And it's interesting that you chose to make him the youngest. And I'm the oldest in my family. And so I can't, I don't know what it feels like to be the youngest, but you have those preconceived notions of the youngest or the baby is always the one that's kind of sheltered and not really, given the full experience of things from the beginning.
Yeah, and that's exactly what this is about. I on the other hand am the youngest of about
Okay.
20 something cousins in total. Um so, when I was growing up, there I had cousins that were 20 years older than me.
Wow.
And, you'd have these family get-togethers, and it's, these generation gaps. And I wanted to capture, you know, part of that feeling for people that have experienced that, but also I just thought it was a good jumping off point for anyone that's feeling like they're missing out on something that everyone else has experienced already.
Okay. I feel like I can't ask you too much because it'll give away a little bit too much of the
Yeah.
story.
Well, I mean, it will and it won't, because so many strange things happen that I can hint at things and you would have no idea what I'm even talking about. I mean, for instance, a big part of the story is a story within the story. There's a book that Roman finds pretty early on in the story, but it takes up a good 20% of the book, the text of this book, which is the story. It's a story from the 1950s about a girl that comes out of the woods with a pack of dogs into a small town somewhere in 1950s America, and sort of the strange events that come after that. So she's sort of like a wild forest child that comes out with this pack of dogs, and soon all the town's dogs are joining this pack, and she's sort of gaining control over the town. And I could tell you that, but that doesn't tell you where any of the story
How it
goes.
fits into the
Right.
grandfather and the toe
Yeah.
beast and
Yeah.
interesting. Wow. So how long did it take you to write this book? And I'm assuming like all these layers come together in the end.
Yeah, and that was sort of the process. Is I had these layers, and specifically that story about the girl and the dogs, that I'd written a long time ago, like close to 10 years ago. I don't remember exactly when I wrote it. And I'd originally had different ideas for it, whether it be a standalone piece, whether it be a collection of part of a collection of stories. But the more that I thought about it as a collection of stories, I said, well, I want to link it into sort of a family history, and like a story, like I want to have a bunch of stories that are sort of passed between this family. So that got me got me to the character of Roman, and I was like, well, I need him to be discovering this story, and this is part of the key of unlocking his family history. And then there are other stories that come throughout, not as long, but just as important. And as it goes along, you see how they're all linked, and it's all connected to one particular event that happened long ago.
Oh, interesting. That's such a neat idea to be able to incorporate like just things that you had done previously and really didn't have a home for, and then kind of piece them together that way.
Yeah, I sort of hold on to anything that I've written, and always with the idea that I might use it again. Often there's just stuff that I never touch again, but I do dip back, and sometimes it's an idea for a character, or a scene that I have in something that I wrote. So, oh, this will work better in this new piece that I'm doing. But I always keep files full of old ideas and old text. And what I also find is you know it sparks a part in your brain. You're a different writer 10 years before, or 15 years before. And so if you bring that stuff out, it sort of brings that old writer back out in you as well. And you remember those old rhythms and those old feelings. And then, it feels almost like you're writing fresh again.
That's neat. And is this set in contemporary time? Is Roman contemporary our time?
Yeah. Yeah. I never state where it's happening. But it is contemporary, and it's clear that it's contemporary. I live in Vermont. In my life, I've lived in New York, New Jersey, Vermont, but mostly through the Northeast. So it's generally like a Northeastern setting, but definitely contemporary.
Right. But it seems like a story like this could have been put maybe anywhere. I mean, does that play a
Yeah.
big role? Like where they are, does that play a big role or no?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, not where they are. No, it doesn't. I mean, it's summertime, so in a sense, it could be anywhere in the U.S. in the summer. Most places are pretty hot in the summer in the U.S. So it's a hot, like August, sort of sweaty setting. A lot of my books, I'll set in particular seasons for, like dead of winter, just because I want that. I want the snow. I want that to be part of the plot. But this, I wanted it to feel like anywhere in America in the summer, hot. Um, it's a suburban setting, but yeah, it never necessarily reveals that, and hopefully that makes it more accessible for people. But for modern kids, it definitely is set in modern times, but it's not focused on modern issues. I wanted to give it there are cell phones, and there's all the amenities of modern life, but it's not about modern life.
Right. Well, and the summer would give the kids the time, and
Yeah,
especially the main character, the time to explore, right?
yeah.
Their grandfather's home. Otherwise, they wouldn't have that, just free time to do whatever.
Yeah, and it always feels to me like a sort of tradition in middle grade of there are lots of middle grade stories about young people connecting with their grandparents, often being sent to their house over the summer. Maybe they live on a farm, or they live, maybe the child is a kid of immigrants, and they go back to their home country. There's a strong tradition of those sorts of stories. So I wanted to evoke that feeling as well. And almost all of those are set in the summer.
Yeah, I was gonna say I have great memories of walking down to well, I would stay with my grandparents, but my great grandparents lived like 2 blocks down. And when we got old enough, we were able to walk down, by ourselves without our parents. And that was like a big like coming of age tradition in our family. So
Yeah, we are literally building an apartment for my wife's parents as we speak, in the back of our property and back of our barn, so they can live on the property, and be closer to the grandkids.
yeah, and I feel like sometimes in the US we don't get that as much as maybe other countries because people move much more, and it's such a big
Yeah,
country that you could live far away from your grandparents and
yeah,
your family.
yeah, yeah. And I knew my grandparents, but not that well. They were definitely a lot older when I was young, so it was sort of focusing on those issues too, and my thoughts I connected with a couple of my grandparents, but my kids thankfully have gotten to know their grandparents much better than I've gotten to know mine.
I think that's a really good gift to
Yeah.
be able to give
Yeah.
your, it's a special bond. So yeah, it's interesting that you wove in so many like the supernatural as well as the family history as well as the birth order and this kind of coming of age story. It seems like it has a lot of themes like hidden in there.
Yeah, yeah, and like I said, I'm sort of holding back on giving a lot of details. It is definitely a very strange story, but I needed it to be, for that reason, I needed it to be grounded in all those things that people can hang on to.
Well, yeah, and a lot of times I think we explore themes easier and through something a little bit supernatural or that's not really real, but then it makes it an easier way to think about those things sometimes.
Yeah, definitely.
And especially for children. I mean, it's like allegories, right? I it's funny because when I was in fourth grade, I think I did this report on World War II and and like looking back as an adult, I think, why did they let me do this? Like, wasn't I too young to see this? But then my kids get up to that grade and they're reading like Fault in Our Stars and books like this. And I'm like, this is really dark, but is it age appropriate? Like, I don't know. I guess it is,
Ye-
right? Somebody decided it was.
Yeah, and then, I have this conversation a lot, and kids are, at least a lot of the kids that I know and a lot of the readers that I've had over the years are pretty good at knowing what their boundaries are and what they're ready for. And that's part of the theme of the book. You're now old enough to hear this is the title, because it's like when you're ready, you can read a book like this. If you pick it up in the beginning, you know that the scary stuff starts to happen in the very beginning. So if that's not for you, you put it down.
Right.
And my kids are that way. They don't have a lot of interest in stuff that scares them at this point. Even my oldest is 12, and she likes she likes crime dramas and legal thrillers and things like that. But if you pushed it over to horror, she would step away immediately.
Right. Everybody's got what they think is scary and not scary, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And remind me, I think you're in education, correct?
I do a bit of teaching. Yeah, I mean, it's not been the whole of my career. I've like
Okay.
dabbled here and there, and currently I'm teaching at a local high school, private alternative high school, where I'm teaching a couple classes for English classes, which has been a great experience and great to connect with teenagers and see what's exciting them. And sometimes it's the same thing that excited me when I was young, and sometimes they have absolutely no interest in such things. But um, I do like that, and over the years, whenever I have opportunities to teach, I will pop in and pop out.
Fun. Well, I'm super excited to read. You are now old enough to hear this. Comes out in March of 2026. What are your next projects on the horizon?
So the following year, I'm pretending like 2026 is not this year. We are in 2026 now, and so yeah, next year in 2027, I have a YA novel called The Swans, which is sort of based on a real story about a town that they've got these swans that are symbolic of the town, and the swans keep on getting killed. And there's a teenager there who uses these stories as an opportunity to make himself known. He's not a bad kid, but some podcasters show up in town to do a whole podcast expose of this history of this town, and he sees that as an opportunity to make a name for himself. And so it's his story, and his good heart gone astray, and making bad decisions. But there's comedy and a little bit of romance and sort of wackiness, not nearly as strange as my middle grade stuff, but hopefully emotionally resonant to older kids.
That's amazing. Well,
Yeah.
tell us where we can find you and your books.
Well, you can find me at just my website, aaronstarmer.com, and I'm on Instagram and Threads and Facebook and all of those. I'm pretty easy to find there. My books. So last year I talked to you about my latest YA that had come out, which was Night Swimming, and hopefully you can find that out at your local stores. It will be coming out in paperback around the same time that my new middle grade is coming out. So hopefully you'll get a new life from that. And then, I'm hoping you can find this new book everywhere. It's getting increasingly harder in this day and age, especially for middle grade to find its way onto shelves. So I at least where I live in Vermont, I've got some wonderful independent booksellers that I work with and talk with a lot, and they do a good job pushing those books. And hopefully word gets out to other independent bookstores, because it's even the big stores these days, it's just harder and harder to find space on their shelves.
Right. And I was thinking back to that age, I was very much, and maybe kids aren't now, maybe kids are more like on their phones and find things that way, or their computers or laptops or whatever they're using. But I was very tactile. Like I like seeing things physically. So going to a bookstore, like my grandparents always took me to this used bookstore every summer. And so I think, yeah, having things that people see you in a bookstore is kind of key sometimes for that age.
Yeah, and hopefully whenever I come out with middle grade books, I'm always looking to do school visits, whenever they're available, or if I can get it out at festivals. So hopefully I will be out there in the spring and summer and next fall sharing the book as many places as I can.
That's awesome. Yeah, those are the funnest things for me is meeting actual readers and be able to talk to them face to face. So. Well, thank you so much for being here, Aaron. Hopefully you will come back when you have your next release next year, and we will have all your links in the show notes.
Great. Thank you very much, Trisha.
Thanks.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Finding the Magic podcast. I'm your host, author and podcaster Trisha Copeland, and I love getting behind the scenes. If you like the podcast, make sure to subscribe and stop in each week to discover new authors and books. Thanks for listening, and until next time, keep finding the magic.